Hi everyone, welcome to True Fan Forum. On this video, I want to kind of discuss an intermingling of two of my just lifelong passions, comic books and writing. Now, I've been a fan of comic books pretty much since before I could even read them, and all I could really do was just flip through the pages and look at the artwork and try to understand a story based solely on the artwork. And also, even just as a little kid, I just love to create stories and characters and write things down. And in fact, over the years, I've created just dozens and dozens of my own comic characters, heroes, villains, supporting cast, all of that. Not because I have any specific goals, at least as of yet, of going into comic books. It was just something I love to do. It came really naturally to me. I think some of my characters are pretty good, actually. And who knows, maybe someday I will get into comic books because I'm not opposed to it. But I fear that if I am going to pursue a interest in comic books, not so much from the art side because I'm not really that great an artist. I'm okay, but not that great. How it'd be probably more of writing, which I do have some talent in. And I fear that if I'm going to learn how to write comic books, who better to learn from than one of the most iconic names in all of comicdom? I'm talking about the great one, the man, that marvelous maker of merriment, Stan Lee. Oh. And specifically his book, Stan Lee's How to Write Comics. Now, just please take a second to take in all of the beauty. Now, this is a wonderful book because it's not just some kind of dry, technical how-to manual. It's just so much more than that. In fact, before Stanley even gets into discussing how to make comic books, he first discusses the history of comic books, when they got started, the kind of content they had, particular comics he liked to read that kind of got him interested in it. And then he has a glossary of terms for people perhaps new to the comic field. For example, he explains what a retcon is, what an annual is, a shared universe, and stuff like that to, again, help people who are new to comic books understand the terminology. And then he kind of goes into tools, basics, the genres of comic books, Western, science fiction, superheroes, all of that. And then he goes into creating the script. And for this section, he focuses on two ways of creating a script. There's first and foremost the Marvel way, the way he created, which is really sort of a plot-driven script, and it's more of a sort of general outline, which basically discusses, the general plot, the characters involved, what happens, but not too specific, which apparently can really give the artist free reign to really make it their own, put their own stamp on the comic book because they have so much, because they're not hampered by a lot of details. Now, second of all is a full script, which basically goes page by page, panel by panel, and describes what happens in every single panel. Now, what's interesting about this is he really doesn't advocate one way or another. Now, you would think, of course he's going to say the Marvel way is the greatest way ever because he made it. It's his way. No, he doesn't do that. What he does instead, which I really admire, is he says that every single writer has to pick what works for them. So if the Marvel way works for them, they should use it. If the full script works for them, use that. If there's something in between, use that. Just use whatever works for them. Now, there's other sections in this book, such as creating the character, storytelling, subplots, formats, and by formats I mean discussing the different kinds of comic books. Miniseries I think that's right. A full series, annuals, one shots, stuff like that. Let's see. He also talks about continuity. One section I really enjoyed was a section on editors and basically going into what they want. And in that section, he has little excerpts of various editors from different comic publishers. For example, he's got Chris Warner from Dark Horse Comics, Andy Schmidt, former Marvel editor. Let's see, who else? Shauna Gore, editor of Dark Horse, Mark Wade, writer editor in chief of Boom Studios, and a couple of others. And what I love about this section is they explain, first off, they kind of go into what they prefer when it comes to submissions. And they also kind of give like little tips and hints on what it's going to mean for a writer, especially a new writer, to break into comics. And they're all very blunt in saying it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard because editors have so many submissions and so little time and so much other work to do that the chances of them just that you're not going to get to everyone. So really, especially the big publishers. So a lot of them advocate basically starting off small. Web comics, maybe going to one of the smaller publishers. Sort of, especially if they're new, which helps newer writers sort of get a little recognition, get some credits to their name, so when they do submit to someone else, they have something to go on. They have a resume. I also enjoyed the fact they also tell kind of what they're looking for in terms of people they want to work with, and mostly that boils down to they prefer to work with people who are going to make their jobs easier. Because again, they've got a lot of work to do, they don't have a whole lot of time to do it, and they don't want to get a script from a writer where there's 100 errors or more in every single page. Nor do they want someone who's going to fight with them every single way on every single little thing or not meet deadlines or any of that. Basically, they want someone they can work with and have a good relationship with. And what I should really mention is one thing I love about this book. It's not just Stan Lee talking. Throughout the entire book, he has interviews and excerpts of interviews of all kinds of writers and a few artists, and they give their take on not just how to create comic books, but their own experiences in the field. Let's see. For example, I think Roy Thomas is in here. I think I saw Neil Gaiman, even Alan Moore. I think is in here, and a lot Brian Hitch. Again, a lot of different people giving their unique take on the comic book business. And again, I love seeing all these different takes and these different views and examples of what it means to be a writer. And it's a wonderful experience. And this book is just wonderful. And also, in addition to the interviews, there's also a lot of just fantastic illustrations that help him illustrate his points. For example, if he's talking about, creating scripts, he'll have a full page from, say, an old Vampirella comic alongside just kind of show the structures of it, the panels and all that. Or he'll have a page of a script and then the actual drawn out page to kind of show how they work with each other. Again, I just love it. And of course, there's a lot of illustrations from, Marvel Comics, obviously, even a couple DC, which is interesting, and a lot of just beautiful work from Dynamite Entertainment, which is not surprising because this book was published in association with them. So obviously, Stan Lee had a lot of access to use their work for his book. But again, it all helps to illustrate his points or his chapters, whatever section he's talking about. One last thing I want to know about sections is there's also an interesting section on professionalism. Because even though making comic books is a creative endeavor, it's also a business. So all writers, artists, whoever, they have to treat it as a business. For example, that means, again, meeting deadlines. That's very, very important. But also being able to work with others, being able to get in contact with people, be able to be reached. Excuse me. Even talks about taxes and kind of showing the point that a lot of writers, especially ones who work on a freelance basis, file their taxes differently than someone who has, a regular sort of stable job. So he also talks about that a little bit. He talks about personal presentation, again, how people, carry themselves and how they act towards others, all of which would basically should help a writer get jobs and keep them. Because again, you don't want to be someone who gets a reputation of being a writer that you can't work with. Either they miss deadlines all the time, or they're really hard to work with, or their work is just subpar, but yet they think it's the greatest thing ever. So again, I love that section. And again, this is a fantastic book because this isn't just talk about how to write the comics. It really gives you an in-depth look of the business, the struggles, struggles, the triumphs, the good, the bad, everything, which I just love. Now, if there's two things I feel I could take away from this book, which is, if you want, themes, if you will, the first one would have to be story. That is paramount. Again and again and again, he talks about in this book how story is the most important thing. Not format, not whatever, story. You A good comic book is one where, with an interesting plot that keeps moving, interesting, intriguing characters that you care about. Right? Nobody cares about format. It's all about story. That is king, and he makes sure he really focuses on that because again, that's the point. Writing comic books, writing anything should be about story, not vocabulary, not how well you can craft a script or how well what little writing tricks you have. Story. All of that helps create the story. You don't have a good story, you got nothing. Another thing, the second thing I think of as you can kind of look at as a theme is collaboration. Again and again, he talks about in this book, you know, being in comic books, unless you're a person who basically makes their own independent comics and you write them and draw them and ink them and all that, it's a collaborative effort. Right? Writers, they create the script, they send it off to the artist works on it, they send pages back to the writer for dialogue and all that, so writers have to be able to look at the script and look at what the artist has done, be able to say, you know what, that's not what I wrote, but dang it, it is good. That is interesting. Oh, that changes things. I like it. Yes, yes. I must change my script. Because again, sometimes if you allow artists to do their job and you really trust the artists to know what they're doing, they can have a really interesting take on a comic and really take the story in ways you didn't think of, but it works. And also he also talks, and sometimes from the excerpts of the writers, they'll talk about how sometimes they felt they had to sort of modify their style because they felt like in order to help a different artist, realize, what, this artist responds better this way rather than this way, so maybe I'll adjust my script a little bit to help him along and help communicate better. Another collaborative effort is working with the editor, being able to take criticism and realize that sometimes the editor is right. So again, a good writer has to be able to take criticism, take feedback, be able to examine it, and put their ego aside enough to say, you know what, he's got a point that really doesn't work. Let me try it. Now again, it doesn't mean writers should be pushovers. They just, sometimes I think it's important to stick to your guns and say, you know what, no, I know what I'm doing. This is important to me. I want to keep it. So it's sort of a balancing act between having a vision for the story, being committed to it, but also being able to take criticism, be able to take change, be able to work with other people, and then not be a pushover, not be someone who's going to basically roll over whatever. Yeah. So basically, to sum everything up, I love this book. It is so fantastic. I mean, I read this thing in just a matter of days because it's such an intriguing, engaging, easy read. I just couldn't put it down. I love it. I love all the illustrations and the beautiful work. The covers, the pages, just everything. Because everything I think helps to illustrate his point. Now, am I gonna say that this is the only book on writing comics you'll ever need? Hands down, no ifs, ands, or buts. No, because I realize that's not accurate. Because I do have a lot of drawing books, and I have found that each book offers something interesting, something unique that helps me learn and helps me develop my skills. So, for example, maybe this book details how to draw hands better a little bit than this book. Or maybe this book goes into drawing different body types better than this book, whatever. The point is being able to take all that knowledge, apply it, and help me, better myself. Again, not the greatest artist in the world. I'm somewhat passable in some respects. But again, even though I'm not gonna say this is the only book I'll ever need writing comics, it is definitely a necessary, worthwhile addition to my collection. I don't know if I'm ever gonna find other writing books, but again, this is definitely something I really recommend for people who are interested in writing comic books, either as an addition to your collection or perhaps as a start. Again, I cannot stress enough how much I love Stan Lee's How to Write Comics. It's just fantastic work from one of the greats in all of comicdom. So I guess that's all, folks. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll watch some of my other videos. And as the man says, Excelsior!